Welcome into a Wednesday edition of Duval Rundown here on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel live, as well as on the 1010XL podcast network. I am your host, Mia O'Brien, joined as I am each and every Wednesday by the embedded, the enshredded, the one and only Hayes Carlyon. Hayes, how we doing on this, albeit cloudy Wednesday in Duval County?
Good morning, Mia. That's an awesome new intro. I love it. So well done, as always.
We're firing up the Jaguars fans everywhere, but especially here as the dog days of summer approach, the NFL dead period. The Jaguars do have one more OTA this week, which we will have a chance to see on the field tomorrow, Hayes, at the Miller Electric Center, before 3 days of mandatory minicamp next week. We're slowly getting to that 6-week dead period. We're going to keep you guys loaded with tons of great content on the 1010XL network. But at the same time, it's time to reflect upon what we've seen so far through 4 or 5 months of the Liam Cohen, James Gladstone era, Hayes. Look ahead to this truly off-season period. And then, of course, training camp kicking back up at the end of July. And so today's topic, the top 3 Jaguars players, storylines, however you want to interpret it, that you are buying stock. You are buying the hype for this player with, of course, an asterisk. I'm not going to allow either of us to select Travis Hunter, who, as our friends on the drill who are currently live on 1010 AM and 92.5 FM are discussing, literally broke the internet. That's the title of their show, their live stream, if you want to click on over to that, perhaps. That he literally broke the internet with that one-handed tipped interception. I know Brett Coleman out here trying to say he fumbled it to the ground. Come on. He knocked it away. It's a forced fumble. He collected the fumble, Hayes. Not going to let you pick Travis Hunter, although I think it's safe to say we're both buying.
I am buying the hype on Travis Hunter, just for the record.
Just to make sure that the audience hears it. It's not that we don't.
Just to be sure that's clear, I'm buying the hype.
He is all the way in. He is not like some other folks around the league who, when the Jaguars dealt all the way up to number 2, questioned the move, said they're not even in win now mode. What the heck are they doing? No, Carlyon is all the way in, as am I. But we can't pick Travis Hunter for this exercise here on Duval Rundown today, Hayes. So lead us off. Who is the first player coach storyline that you are buying heading into 2025?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and there's a lot of great candidates here. I guess I'll go a little under the radar for my first one to kind of get us off here. I'm going to say Tyson Campbell. I'm buying the hype on.
Okay.
Now, part of that is I think he's got to stay healthy, but I think he looks good. I think to hear Liam Cohen talk about how more of an emphasis on zone is going to help Tyson. And look, I think he's going to have chances because I do think that Travis Hunter is going to play a fairly high amount of snaps opposite him. And I think quarterbacks are going to learn pretty early on that that's not where you want to throw the ball. So I think Tyson Campbell has a chance to have a really strong bounce back year. We've obviously seen him play at a high level when healthy. And he's still such a young guy. I mean, there were guys in this draft class that are older than Tyson Campbell. He's just, I want to say, barely 25. And so it feels like he's been here a really long time, but he came out of Georgia at such a young age that he hasn't even hit the prime of his career yet. So a little off the radar, when we talk about the Jaguars, stars. But Tyson Campbell is somebody that I think is going to jump back into that category this season in this scheme. And if he can stay healthy, I think by the time we get to the end of the year, Tyson Campbell is viewed by Jaguar fans and the NFL nation as a very high quality starting corner.
I think the biggest question, Hayes, when it comes to Tyson Campbell is just the availability and this idea of the soft tissue injuries that have continued to build one upon the other year over year, now the last 2 seasons. Because if we do flip the calendar back to 2022, especially in the second half of 2022, in which plenty of Jaguars were on the national radar, but there was a conversation to be had that both he and then paired with Darius Williams, once he returned to his natural position outside, that they were one of the best cornerback duos in the league. And so I think that a lot of the players we're going to run through here today that we are buying stock, buying the hype, Hayes, much like Tyson Campbell, I think it's just because of lack of ability we quite frankly forgot about them on a national level.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. So I'm excited to see, what he can do. And again, I'm not like a big X's and O's guy, like at all. Like I love the game and things like that, but I don't have the knowledge, the nuances of things like this. So it's interesting to hear a new coach talk about, the differences. And again, it just really struck me how Liam Cohen talked about, Tyson being able to have eyes more on the quarterback, things like that, things that maybe he hasn't been accustomed to, and how that'll play to his skill set. So I'm excited. Again, we'll see. He's got to stay healthy, but yeah, I'm really encouraged with what Tyson Campbell can be in this scheme, really based off of what Liam Cohen said. How about you? Give us one of yours.
Let's start it off hot, Hayes. I am part of what I thought would be a much larger majority. Instead, I think it's a minority for whatever the reason here in the city of Jacksonville, in that I am a believer in Walker Little. I believe that armed with his first real opportunity to be the starting left tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars for an entire season, that you will see the now fifth-year tackle continue to progress. Last season, again, Cam Robinson started the year, but Walker Little, a 4.1% pressure rate, according to PFF in 2024. That was 8th among all starting left tackles, including Cam Robinson. That is a lower number than what he posted in 2023, the first 4 games of which he started because Cam Robinson was suspended. And he was graded out as the best Jaguars offensive lineman during that 4-game stretch. Then things get a little wonky. They try to kick him inside to guard. He gets hurt. Cam gets hurt. He gets jerked up and down the offensive line from guard to left tackle. Maybe we're going to throw him in at right tackle. But I think it bears noting, just like Tyson Campbell, we look back at Walker's 2022, especially that playoff run, and say, oh man, what a performance it was against Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. 39 pass blocking snaps against those 2 premier pass rushers in that playoff game. 0 pressures, 0 sacks allowed. My goodness, he must be the future. In 2022, and again, it was the second half of the season that we saw a ton of Walker Little, he had a 10.1% pressure rate allowed. So now he's gotten that down to 4.1%. And yet we still have fans and we still have doubters in the city of Jacksonville itself. I understand this notion of he's never won a starting job. Well, maybe that's because the previous regime had this strange complex when it came to Cam Robinson, Hayes, that I think is something we really do need to dive into on today's episode, but just big picture. For lack of a better term, I don't know if you heard it. I started yelling on Helmets and Heels at Lauren the other day about it because I was like, this notion that Fred Johnson is going to usurp Walker Little, that Chuma Edoga is going to push Walker Little. Yes, push. But usurp, I mean, people just try to say that out loud. Say that Fred Johnson is going to start over Walker Little and try to rationalize that in your brain. Because to me, you look at the numbers, you look at what the behind the scenes, what we've heard about the work ethic and everything else. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know where this negativity towards him continues to come from.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Walker Little fan, but I understand what you're saying. He's certainly been dealt a bad hand of cards by the previous administration. They've never figured out where to play him. They certainly had a massive loyalty to a player in Cam Robinson that never really paid any dividends to them for that loyalty. Cam Robinson was probably here 2 years longer than he should have been. So I mean, I get all that. I wish Walker Little had a little bit more edge to him. It just, and maybe that'll grow. I mean, maybe now, that'll start to flourish as he becomes again a veteran and on a second contract, and and somebody now that looks around the offensive line room and is like, wow, I'm one of the elder statesmen now in terms of Jaguars tenure. So maybe we see a change. I agree with you on the Fred Johnson thing. The reason it doesn't make sense to me, and again, I'm kind of going down the same well as they went down with the Cam Robinson contract of, well, of course he's going to start for us. We're paying him $17 million a year. Well, extrapolate that to the Fred Johnson contract on the 180 side. Fred Johnson is making what, like, I think it's a 1 year, like $1.5 million deal. So what does that tell you? That tells you that 31 other clubs basically viewed him as a journeyman. I mean, for that position, that's paying nothing. I mean, that and Fred, there's no reason Fred Johnson would have taken a significant discount to play for the Jaguars. So obviously this was the best deal he could get. Well, if this is the best deal he could get on the open market, then obviously what that tells you is every decision maker in the NFL views him as a backup. And so that's why, yeah, it's hard to buy into it. I certainly buy into the concept of they wanted to add free agents. They wanted to create the illusion of competition. But yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if I would say it this way. If Walker Little even just has a B- training camp, he's going to be the starting left tackle. I think the Fred Johnson, that's only if Walker Little like completely falls on his face in training camp. So, I mean, I think the probability is 90% that Walker Little is the starting left tackle now. I mean, for week 1, again, if he's healthy. So I'm maybe not as big a believer in his talent as you are, and I hope you're right. I mean, hopefully he'll have a great career here and a great season, and hopefully the new staff can bring it out, of him. But I'm definitely with you in that I don't think he's in much danger. I mean, I think it's going to take like a really, really disastrous training camp for Walker Little to lose his job.
Not only did I want to lead off with him as my first player that I'm buying the hype and buying the stock haze because I do believe it, because I do think he's never had an opportunity to, in the words of Josh Hines-Allen, get lathered up to actually see game after game, having a consistent 17-game stretch to prove himself, but also because, and this is with all due respect, and this is why I wanted to get it on the record on a Duval Rundown episode, because I certainly did on Helmets and Heels on Monday. With all due love and respect to our friend Pete Prisco of CBS Sports, I believe it was on your show, The Frangie Show, when I just think he misspoke. I honestly think
he said it twice. He definitely didn't misspeak. Because he said it one time, and Frank and I followed up on it because it definitely caught our ear, and he reemphasized, "No, I believe it'll be Fred Johnson." And then we asked again, like a week or two down the road, and he still maintained it. So he didn't misspeak. Now he could be incorrect, and I would agree with you that I think ultimately he will be. But obviously, somebody, probably Baselli, told Pete, Fred Johnson is here to really push him. Now,
right.
I don't, I think that's where it ends. At this point, I would be surprised again if Fred Johnson ends up being the starter. And the reason it caught my ear is what we just talked. I mean, the contract tells you he's not a starting left tackle. I mean, if they even thought there was a chance that he'd be a starting left tackle, he would have gotten $8 million a year, I would guess. From somebody.
Chuma Edoga got more. I mean, for what it's worth,
yeah.
If we really want to compare dollars and cents, why isn't he the one who, a USC Trojan? Why is he not the one that Pete's referencing first?
And again, what they're paying these players is, it's not maybe 100%, but it's certainly 95%. Your contract tells you your role on the team, usually, and that's not something that just bad organizations do. I mean, that's across the league. I mean, what a player makes tells you how that player is looked at in terms of their role. And you don't see a starting left tackle on a 1 year, $5 million, $1.3 million deal. You don't see it. So that's why I don't think it's overly realistic. But to clarify on Pete, yes. I mean, it's what Pete believes. It definitely wasn't, he wasn't like misspeaking or whatever. I mean, he believes it. We'll follow up again, and I think Pete's going to be here next week for the mandatory minicamp for one of the days. So, we'll definitely on the Frangie Show. He joins us at 5:00 on Friday. So, it'll be a question that certainly comes up again, particularly after Pete's had a chance to be here and see the team and also obviously speak to the key figures.
I love it. I love it. I also love the 450 plus of you watching live on Twitter and YouTube right now. Appreciate you guys leaving your top 3 things that you are buying the hype, you are buying the stock, whether that be players or storylines heading into the Jaguars 2025 season. Keep them coming. We'll get to a couple of those in just a little bit. Let's keep it moving on our front, Hayes. Who is the second player or second storyline that you are buying stock, buying the hype heading into 2025?
I'll take an easy one now. Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, I'm believing that he could put up an extraordinary year statistically. You know, you're starting to see some of the national guys throwing out some pretty big statements, but it's hard to go against it. I mean, you hear Liam Cohen talk about it, his freakish ability, his ability to hurt defenses from a variety of spots. You put a talent like Brian Thomas Jr., who finished 3rd in the NFL in receiving yards last year, with a multitude of things against him. He was a rookie. They didn't really try to feature him until the second half of the season when they had no choice but to. Once they made it clear he was the sole focus of the passing game, defenses still could not stop him, and he did a lot of his damage with Mac Jones at quarterback. Now, the league will counterpunch him. There will be a whole offseason where defensive coordinators can study the tendencies of Brian Thomas Jr. But I don't think it's going to matter. I mean, I think with him getting a massive upgrade in offensive scheme, innovation, creativity, I think that helps. Obviously, you hope Trevor Lawrence stays healthy. Having Travis Hunter on the other side is going to absolutely open things up for Brian Thomas Jr. And I think the fact that Liam Cohen is committed to moving him around to maximize his matchups, I don't know if he'll break the NFL record for 100-yard games in a season or anything like that. But, I mean, I also think he could have some games where he's got like 195 yards in a game. I mean, I think Brian Thomas Jr. is getting ready to threaten every single season Jaguars receiving record that is on the books. I think he's got that kind of ability. I don't think you're going to see any kind of sophomore slump here again if he stays healthy. So obviously we're all buying the hype on Brian Thomas Jr. being an emerging superstar, but I'm buying the hype on him having really a year for the ages. I think it sets up really well for Brian Thomas Jr. to be one of the most impressive statistical players in the NFL this season.
Robert says, I think 1,500 yards for BTJ. What say you, Hayes? Especially knowing, and let's couple it with this notion of Liam Cohen wants BTJ to work out of the slot a little bit more. I've heard from some people that believe that is the next step in Brian Thomas Jr.'s game, the idea of he can play all 3 positions, the idea of what sort of disguises you can create by having him operate out of the slot. Whereas I've also heard from some personnel executives around the league and staffers and coaches and scouts who've said, I wouldn't pigeonhole him there. I don't think he's Cooper Kupp. I think he's much more. But we see Justin Jefferson, who perhaps is, again, that's a very lofty comparison, but I would argue that's the comp right now of what his ceiling is. He operates out of the slot. What say you if that 1,500 yards is A, realistic, B, coupled with this idea of him playing a bit more inside?
It's absolutely realistic. I mean, because that would be like 90 yards a game. Mm-hmm. He's not going to have very many games where he comes back into the locker room with 60 yards. And I don't think you'll ever see him have games where he only has like 2 catches for 30 yards. So, and I do think he's going to have some outings where he's 150 yards and beyond. So, yeah, I think he can. I think he can hit the average of what it would take to get to 1,500. And I think the other thing too is, I think you look at again, Liam Cohen. I get it. He's never been a head coach before, but I can't help but think it's going to be a huge upgrade in terms of offensively what they're doing. And I mean, I have disparaged the last staff, and I feel guilty doing it now because we're in June, and at some point you've got to move on. And I think it's pretty clear to everybody how bad it was last year. So maybe this will be the last time I'll say this, because I'm sure it gets tiring. But
no, it doesn't.
It
Taylor Dahl loved last week's Duval rundown. Taylor Dahl literally scrolled ahead, she told me, to your rant about the previous regime at the end of last week's episode. That's a plug to go check out episode 135, folks. Continue, Hayes.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and it will stop at some point, but it's not stopping today. So I just think that it's just such a dramatic upgrade in terms of where the league is now offensively. Again, I will go back to two things. Doug Pederson admitted to us that the offense he was running last year was basically the same offense he was running in 2017 when they won the Super Bowl in Philadelphia. That's not how this league works. You've got to evolve. This league changes drastically every season. And these defensive coordinators, they will catch up to you if you don't keep it fresh, if you don't evolve. Andy Reid isn't running the same stuff he was running in 2017. So it was madness. And then you've got his son playing tight end, or at least being on the team.
Not his son who's the OC, the actual son.
That's what this NFL organization was doing. And so that's why I think with Liam Cohen here, and a bright, innovative, creative offensive brain trust, I do think Brian Thomas Jr., I don't think there's really any limitations you can put on statistically what he will do. If it's 1,500 yards, I would take the over.
You said it on the kickoff show, the Terminex kickoff show that we both host during the season, Hayes, 5 hours before kickoff ahead of every Jaguars game. The league changes 10% every year. And at that point in 2024, that would mean 7 to 8, depending on what your measurement is, 7 to 8 years since Doug Pederson and the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl. So the league had changed 70 to 80%, and yet it was the same offense. I'll leave it at that. My number 2 player that I am buying the hype, buying the stock of. Let's go back to the defensive side of the ball for a bit here, Hayes. I am giving this player what I like to call, and I don't even know, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone. I'm giving this player the Rayshawn Jenkins Bounce Back Memorial Award. Not that Rayshawn, he's alive and well, but I think that it's important to note that we're not just buying players who we believe are going to be Pro Bowlers or all pros. Rayshawn Jenkins, when he was signed in 2021, a bit of a disappointment that first season here in Jacksonville. In 2022, paired with that Mike Caldwell scheme, paired opposite Andre Sisco for a full season, Dewey Wingard being tossed in here and there and in 3 safety looks. All of a sudden, he looked like, my goodness, this is a foundational piece, even if he is not a Pro Bowler. I believe Arik Armstead will have a similar bounce back, actually playing his natural position heading into the 2025 season. Again, I'm not picking him to make a Pro Bowl. I'm not picking him to be an all-pro. I'm going to rattle off his numbers from 2023, and I don't even know if he gets to some of these marks, Hayes. But at the very least, especially, and this is a plug for our good friend John Osher with Jaguars.com, if you listen to his conversation with Arik Armstead from over the weekend, Arik also cites this idea of he has a new appreciation for situational pass rushers because that's basically what every member of the defensive line was last year, because they were coming in hot, coming in cold, never had a chance to get lathered up, to be able to put plays consistently back to back to back to generate momentum. And he said he developed a new appreciation for players in the league that is their role, regardless of the team they're on, because they are not a perennial starter, perennial all-pro rotational piece. And so in 2023, among eligible interior defensive linemen, according to PFF, Arik Armstead was first in pressure rate on 3rd and 4th down with a 22.2% rate. Of course, as we both know, on 3rd and 4th down this past season under the previous defensive regime, he was not playing in the interior. They had him cosplaying as an edge player. And regardless if it was 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 10. 5th in pass rush grade, according to PFF, 86.5%. 9th among interior defensive linemen in 2023. In win percentage, according to PFF, 10th according to ESPN, somewhere between that 13 to 15.2% win rate, depending on which metric you subscribe to. The point is, he was top 10 pretty much across the board in interior defensive linemen pass rush win rate, success rate, pressures, however you want to look at it. The Jaguars, when they signed him, what did we talk about? This idea of they had not had, outside of a flash from Devon Hamilton in 2022, they had not had an interior defensive lineman who could generate pressure and affect the quarterback outside of creating push and defending in the run game since arguably Marcel Darius, Calais Campbell, Malik Jackson, kind of, maybe, like that whole crew. But obviously Calais went inside and outside. Darius was more of a run plugger to begin with. And so I'm not picking Arik Armstead to make a Pro Bowl. I'm not picking him to be an All-Pro, but I am picking him to have a similar bounce back year as Rashawn did in the 2022 season and be an integral part to this team. What say you?
Yeah, I've got Armstead on my list as well. I think it's a great call. And, you know, and you bring up an excellent point about sometimes free agents need that second year. Tashawn Gibson was the same way. He came here to the Jaguars, had a disappointing first year, and then his second year was outstanding to the point where the staff really was lobbying for him to be a Pro Bowl selection. So it does sometimes take a year, and it can especially take a year when the plan is atrocious and how they're going to utilize you in your first year. So a big part of that is, you know, him playing the more natural tackle position. And he looks good. And it's hard to imagine that a defensive tackle, he won't be, to your point, one of the best interior pass rushers that they've had here. The bar is not very high, but if he can give them like Malik Jackson level production, I mean, they've got a chance to take a big step forward, and I think he can. I mean, I think he's healthier, you know, than he also was a year ago. But obviously, a lot of this is how he was utilized, and you know, they've got a much better plan for him this year. So I'm with you. I think Arik Armstead. I mean, I'm not expecting crazy sack numbers, but I think Arik Armstead will make plays that will lead to, like, Trayvon Walker getting a sack, Josh Hines-Allen getting a sack, maybe a sack they wouldn't have gotten, but because Arik Armstead got the push, it moved the quarterback to one side or the other. So while his sack numbers may not be gaudy, I think you could look at it and trace 3.5, 4 sacks that he didn't get to other guys, but he's the reason that sack happened.
And it's so interesting you bring that up, Hayes, because as I've plugged now several times, our friend Mike Silver at The Athletics, The Why is Everything. I got to the chapter about when Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh had to ask Arik Armstead, I believe it would have been the 2020 or 2019, the Super Bowl season. That season, well, yes, the Niners came out of nowhere after, you know, picking in the top 10 for the previous 2-3 years of Kyle Shanahan's tenure. It was around the bye week. It was around the midway point that they asked Arik Armstead. They said, you know what? We know we've been rotating you inside and outside, but we really need you to play inside and create opportunities for other players, even if your stat line won't be that gaudy. And he said, whatever it takes for the team to win, I'm there. That was 6 years ago. And of course, the Niners went to a Super Bowl that year and went to another one a few years later with him playing that similar role that really unlocked him, as opposed to maybe the more edge role and 5 technique that I guess he was playing when he first came out of Oregon. And so this is not a player who is looking to have 10 sacks and to bang his chest. I mean, he's the Walter Payton Man of the Year, for crying out loud. But it's so interesting to me that you have proof of concept of literally the Niners made this philosophical change, this physical change of his position along the line consistently. And all of a sudden it unlocks this new level for their defense. And yet last year's regime said, oh, no, we're going to play him on the edge. And again, I just feel like in our conversations, Hayes, with Anthony Campanile and Liam Cohen, the consistent message has been, it's the clear and obvious. And that's what we're going to do. Like, not just with Arik Armstead, but with every single player. There's a lot of clear and obvious here, and we're going to go back to that.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, and that leads me to my next guy, because I think for similar reasons, big time year coming, I think, for Foye Oluokun. And again,
okay,
you know, somebody that was having a great run as a Jaguar, you know, leading the NFL in tackles, or right at the top of the list every year that he's here. And then Ryan Nielsen arrives and decides we're going to play him at a different position. And Foye also was hurt. You know, he had the wrist injury. He had a sports hernia injury that he was playing through. So healthier now, getting ready to turn 30 years old later this year. So, right in the prime of his career, obviously a very cerebral player. And he's somebody now back at his natural position. I think, you hope that what's missing for Foye, and by his own admission, is the really big plays. So we'll see if he can generate those this season. He has 5.5 sacks as a Jaguar. Can he give them 3 sacks this year and a couple of interceptions, a couple forced fumbles, a fumble recovery? Like, that's what's, been missing. But the tackles and the consistent production from Foye are there. So again, somebody that's now being asked to do his most natural thing, I think is going to be a big benefit for the defense and for Foye Oluokun. So again, you bring up an excellent point. These coaches that have gotten here have done a good job of just saying, all right, let's look at the problems. Usually, or not. I mean, in this case, I think a high number in these circumstances are the simplest explanation is the correct one. And it is stunning how many poor choices the previous staff made on both sides of the ball, but particularly the defensive side, in terms of what they wanted to do: gain weight, play guys out of position, like Oluokun, like Armstead. Again, not really figuring out Devin Lloyd, what fits him. I think as you look at it, Foye Oluokun is somebody that has proven he can go get 180 tackles in a season and is an excellent communicator. And again, is drawing praise from the coaches. Now, again, Liam Cohen was asked about Foye Oluokun. It's not like it was an unsolicited response, but I still thought it was a good response in talking about what a great communicator, what a great leader, how much of an asset he is in the meeting room, asking the right questions, engaging, asking questions that then it engages everybody in a conversation about things. I think Foye Oluokun is going to have a really big year.
And I think what's going to be equally as critical, Hayes, if they are able to, I don't want to say, I want to throw, and I said this on last week's episode, and I've said it on Helmets and Heels too. I want to get away from the word simplify, but if they are able to make this defense consumable for the players who are a part of it, to the point where you are given one assignment. If they show this look, you do this. If they show this look, you do this. And I think that for a player like Devin Lloyd, for a player like Ventrell Miller, for any number of the safeties and corners that were rotated in, that Foye Oluokun, because he has the green dot, was having to tell them where to line up the last 2 to 3 years. I think that will unlock another level to his game, solely because he will have the time and effort to actually diagnose the play himself and not having to worry about, okay, is everyone else lined up in the right spot too? Because that ultimately, that's taken away from some opportunities for him.
Without a doubt, it's a great point. And, that you do hope that this will unlock that. And again, it's a new staff. Anthony Campanile has never done this before, but again, the bar is so low that it's hard to believe he won't be better. I mean, even Mike Caldwell was a D defensive coordinator. I mean, he was a D. If you gave him a grade on his 2 years, it would be D. Somehow it got worse with Ryan Nielsen. So if Anthony Campanile is just a C-level defensive coordinator, it's going to feel like we've got the next Buddy Ryan here in Jacksonville.
I cannot. Real quick, before we get to my final player, and then Hayes, we'll get to the best of the rest of the players we're buying the stock for. Social says Mia and Hayes are not giving Trevor any hype. I mean, look, I just didn't want to take the obvious here. And also, look, Trevor Lawrence has a lot to prove in 2025.
I need to see it. I mean, he's not on my list. It's not that I don't have confidence that he can play at a high level, but I mean, I need to see more, I would say, for me. I mean, I'm not discouraged by anything I've seen out of Trevor, but I also haven't seen anything that, and not that I would really expect to, having only seen like 3 OTAs, but yeah, that he's not overly high for me. I mean, I think he'll he'll have a good season compared to what we have seen over the last couple of years. So it's hard. He's not a negative for me, but he's not like a huge positive either.
From Joshua, the question is for Hayes. Do you think, barring injury, could Trevor be a top 5 quarterback this season?
I don't think so. I think he can be like top 10.
Yep. I would say the same thing.
Yeah, I just don't think his instincts are good enough yet. And I do think they can improve. I think instincts are something that with time, he's still a young guy. I do think he can get better, at that, the savviness of playing the position at this level. But I still think he has a long way to go. It's just with situational football and things like that. So, I think he can have a very strong season. I wouldn't be surprised if, we get to the end of the year and you don't have to have too many guys withdraw from the Pro Bowl games for Trevor to be one of those guys. But so I think it'll be one of his better years. But I don't think we're going to look up in January and he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. And I think, by the way, that's good. If he's like the 10th or 11th best quarterback in the NFL across the board statistically, that'd be a good thing. Season. That'd be a great season for Trevor. And I know that there are those of you that want more. So what I will tell you is that in all the research, and we're going to have a very special guest on Friday as we look at the McVay tree, the quarterbacks that have been brought along in the Kyle Shanahan McVay world, most of those quarterbacks, including future Hall of Famers like Matt Ryan and Aaron Rodgers, did not actually reach their ceiling with that coach until year 2. And so that's where I think, look, Baker Mayfield and Liam Cohen were a match made in heaven. But what we also forget, Liam Cohen got a sneak peek of him in 6 games back in 2022 with the Los Angeles Rams. And so there was a little bit of some continuity there. There was a mutual understanding between the two. And so they had a little bit of a head start. They also had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, which I understand Trevor Lawrence will have Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter. But at the same time, that's a player in his first year, another one in his second year, compared to 2 perennial Pro Bowlers, and one's a future Hall of Famer, first ballot probably. So I do want to just note that. It's not that we aren't buying the hype for Trevor. I would just argue there is more hype for other players that we are both drinking that Kool-Aid perhaps a little bit more eagerly perhaps than the Trevor Kool-Aid. For the sake of time, let's keep it moving. Hayes, I'm going to be honest with you. I had 2 names written down for number 3 for me because we're each doing our top 3. And I was going to wait to see who you picked before I selected either De'Ami Brown or Brenton Strange, who I have also seen votes for in the chat. But I'm calling an audible. I'm going with Travis Etienne. I'm going with the wild card pick. While everyone else in the national media thinks he's on the trade block, while everyone else thinks Bashal Tutin is going to usurp his role, what if I told you that Travis Etienne, and I don't know this because I didn't get a chance to speak to him at Monday's OTA, but what if he views this contract year that he is currently faced with, because he is playing on the 5th-year option with his final year here as a Jaguar as of this writing. What if he views it as an opportunity to be the next Josh Jacobs, the next Saquon Barkley, to have an opportunity to cash in, whether here or somewhere else, because it is a prove-it year? We've seen players like Jawan Taylor, heck, even Josh Hines-Allen in contract years ball out in the not-so-distant past here in Duval County. And you couple that with the idea of what Travis Etienne can do in the receiving game. We had a really good discussion on Helmets and Heels yesterday regarding Bucky Irving. And I think that there is this notion of, well, look at what Bucky was able to do with Liam. If you go back, Bucky Irving was more of a receiving back the first 7 to 9 weeks of the season. He actually didn't have double-digit carries in back-to-back games until week 14, week 15. He did not become the featured back until then. So this notion that Bashal Tutin is just going to become the featured back or Tank Bigsby is immediately going to have 20-plus carries, I don't believe that to be true because I believe this will be a true rotation and stable. But I also think that Bucky Irving's ability in the passing game and the vertical threat that he can be is a role that, well, yes, Tutin, LaKent Allen, Tank Bigsby can all catch passes out of the backfield. I go back to that wheel route touchdown in the rain up in Western Pennsylvania against the Pittsburgh Steelers, week 8 of the 2023 season. And I say, if you're Liam Cohen, that's clear and obvious of what Travis Etienne has in his skill set. Go back to what they ran at Clemson. And I just cannot come off the point, especially after his very pointed comments at the podium on Monday, that Liam Cohen believes that if he can get the best of Travis Etienne, he can be here for the entire 2025 season and can make an impact.
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm more of a Tootin guy in terms of, I think when we get to the end of the year, like who will have the most opportunities and the most yards. Today, I would say Tootin. But I hear what you're saying. And again, Travis Etienne, you can make a lot of the same points that we've made. This scheme probably helps him, just as it probably helps every offensive player. And defensive player. So, I think that makes sense. And yes, Liam was very, very effusive in saying how Travis Etienne is going to be a Jaguar and that they're very happy with him. I think his role is going to diminish as the season goes on. But we'll see. I mean, he certainly has the skill set, to your point. He's got all the motivation in the world. If he has a great year and is able to hit the market, which you have to think he would be, I don't think the Jaguars would be interested in tagging him or a second contract. So, I mean, there is millions of dollars for Travis Etienne to earn this season with some strong play. I think I agree with you in the sense that I think Liam Cohen will take advantage of his playmaking ability in a way that the previous staff didn't. But I think he's got some limitations in terms of being physical that I think will lead to opportunities for Bashal Tootin. So, I'm more of a Tootin guy at this point, that he'll have the better year. But I hear you. And it was, you certainly got a big boost from Liam Cohen talking about, he doesn't understand where these narratives are coming from in terms of reports that, Travis Etienne isn't long for the Jaguars.
And to your point, even the previous regime, I can say this now, the statute of limitations is up, readily admitted that in terms of in between the tackles, we talked about it at length on 1010XL. Tank Bigsby is the more natural running back. Travis Etienne may be the better football player, the better playmaker, but you can say that Tank Bigsby is the better running back in between the tackles, and those two things can coexist simultaneously. And if Liam Cohen wants to be a ground and pound running attack, that doesn't fit Travis Etienne's skill set. But I think that this is going to be a multidimensional offense, and that's where more of the finesse, although it won't be as finesse as perhaps Press Taylor's offense, that's where I think it'll suit Etienne just fine. As social notes, and this is what I go back to too, disrespectful to Etienne, like wasn't he second in total yards against behind only Christian McCaffrey 2 years ago? Yes, that's accurate. Back-to-back, over 1,000 yards, total yards for Travis Etienne, and that's why I can't quit him. But maybe I'm in the minority, and that's just fine. Real quick, let's hit a couple in the comments, Hayes, before we have you empty your notebook of your players you're buying the hype, buying the stock for. Mississippi Mikey over here in the YouTube chat has been stumping for Buster Brown. Don't care about Etienne. And then he went up with another comment that I think he deleted where he said, I need to, here we go. You guys talk about the same guys every episode. I need to hear more about Buster Brown, Jordan Jefferson, Jack Kaiser. Mikey, you may be the only one hyping those three players up, which is why we are not hitting them on today's episode, because this is about players that there is hype and we are buying said hype. A couple of you guys also submitted a couple different top hype storylines that you're buying regarding Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen once again going into the double-digit sack numbers for both players, 25 plus sacks. That's one that I know I agree with, Hayes. What say you?
I'd go over on 25 sacks for the pair. I think they both look in outstanding shape, and again, they're hitting the prime of their careers now. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if Trayvon and Josh stay healthy, I think they each can, I think they could each go over 15 sacks individually, but certainly as a collective, I think 25 sacks is very safe.
Steve had Trayvon at 12, Josh at 15. Hayes, what other players are you having as honorable mentions perhaps on your list? Let's empty that notebook.
Yeah, I'll say Ogbah. Emmanuel Ogbah is somebody that I think I'm buying the hype on. You did hear Anthony Campanile talk about his affection. I think you asked him about that. His affection for Emmanuel Ogbah, what he can do is that supplemental edge presence, and he looks great. So I think Emmanuel Ogbah, if you're looking for somebody that can give you that 6 to 7 sack production, I think Emmanuel Ogbah is going to be that player for the Jaguars, and that's crucial. It's something they haven't had in a couple of years.
And a couple of you guys, Brian included, of course, noting the news of the day late yesterday that the Jaguars signed Dawuane Smoot after 1 year up in Buffalo, not only reunited with the former assistant defensive line coach, now the defensive line coach here in Jacksonville, Matt Edwards, but obviously reunited with the franchise that drafted him in 2017. Hayes, we went from not having a third edge in Jacksonville to now we've got a plethora of them. The way I would
embarrassment of riches.
Here we are at long last. I just needed Arden Key, although he did build the city, so maybe that's underselling Arden Key. I look at it this way. It's a smart signing by the Jaguars to bring in Dawuane Smoot, not only because he's a great locker room guy, he knows the team, he knows the defensive line coach. But for me, this signing says one of two things. Number one, cheap veteran on the street. What does that say about his value? What's maybe left in the tank? Okay, sure. The Jaguars, outside of Jalen McLeod, the Buck linebacker out of Auburn, did not draft any defensive linemen. James Gladstone, very vocal that they want those young undrafted free agent interior defensive linemen, even some of the young guys on the edge, guys they've had in the system for a couple of years between Miles Cole, Tyler Lacey. They want those guys to compete. This signing on June 3rd says to me either we figured we'd add to the competition, or maybe we're not seeing what we need to see out of that group. So let's bring in another proven commodity. And if he does have something left in the tank and we've signed him for, somewhere around the league minimum, this is a win-win for both parties.
That's what I think you're dead on. I think it's a sign that maybe the in-house solutions at 4 or 5 weren't coming along as quickly as they'd hoped. And again, this is where I commend James Gladstone on, being able to make decisive decisions. He comes out of the draft. The draft doesn't present really what they were looking for at edge. What does he do? He signs Emmanuel Ogbah like the day after the draft ends. That's commendable. That's okay. The draft didn't present what we wanted. Let's pivot. Let's go get a free agent that can really come in and help us. And I think Ogbah will. And this is the same thing. You've now had a month with these guys, and you've gotten it's you obviously can't get a real physical look at them because there's no contact, but certainly you're picking up on, do they have the mental acumen to do what we're asking them to do? How are they doing in the classroom? How are their work habits? How are they progressing in terms of drills that you're seeing on the field? And I don't get a sense that there's any patience here, which is good. This team doesn't have its first round pick next year. I mean, they need to win this division. And so, we're still early in the offseason, but if you're at this point and you don't like necessarily what you're seeing from edge beyond Trayvon, Josh, and Emmanuel, absolutely. Go get a guy that, Tony Baselli's very familiar with. I'm sure he was able to give Gladstone and Cohen a full briefing on the kind of person and player Dawuane Smoot is, and that's really beneficial. So, if you can add Dawuane Smoot, and if he can give you 4.5 sacks, which I think he can, as the fourth guy, you've really done a good job of supplementing. When you look at the best defenses in the league and you look at their sack numbers, they've got like 6 guys that are contributing 3.5 to 4 sacks at a minimum. The last 2 years for the Jaguars, it's been 2 guys, and that's just not going to work. So, I think in looking at it, I think it was a very savvy move, and it's great that that Dawuane Smoot is here. But I think Ogbah is really got a chance. Let me ask you this: between Ogbah and Smoot, would you be surprised if they combined for 10 sacks?
That would be, I think, in my opinion, a bit of a lofty number. I think 10's a little lofty for the two, but I do think if we set the over-under, Hayes, at like 8, I'm absolutely taking the over. I think it'll be somewhere between, if each of them gets to 4 conservatively, and to your point, if Foye Oluokun is given an opportunity to blitz, if Devin Lloyd is given an opportunity to blitz, Arik Armstead, by virtue of the position he's playing, is able to get into the backfield more. I think you're going to see more players have 2 to 4 sacks each, as opposed to, hey, a defined, this guy's got 5 to 7. But I do think if there's a player who's going to have 5 to 7, it's going to be Emmanuel Ogbah. Ultimately, I go back to that 2022 season. Dawuane Smoot, before he tore his Achilles on the turf at MetLife, had, I believe, 6.5 sacks. Arden Key only finished with 4.5 sacks. I think that's a common misconception. People think that Arden Key had like 9 sacks that year. He did not. Dawuane Smoot did not. And I think that the fact that you had those two combined, so that's 6.5 plus 4.5, I guess that does get you to 11. Maybe your 10 is not that far off, Hayes.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see how it all comes together. That's for sure.
All right, we are done here on this Wednesday edition of Duval Rundown. We've kept you all way too long. Over 850 of you tuning in live to the Embedded and Shredded, the Hammer, Hayes Carlyon, and myself, Mia O'Brien. If your friends say they missed our live show, that is just fine. You can listen on demand at the 1010XL Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can also rewatch this episode on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel. Leave a like on your way out the door. Subscribe as well. We are now over 5,000 subscribers. Round of applause for everybody for all your help in growing the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel in 1 year's time. Hayes, I will see you on the practice field tomorrow at the Miller Electric Center. And of course, I will see you next week for Duval Rundown right here on 1010XL. Appreciate everybody hopping on. We will catch you next week.
Sounds great, Mia. Thank you.